Many years ago, about 8 years ago, I created a term called Pinoy love languages. If you've been following me, you know my podcast is also named Pinoy Love Language. It is my way to collect different ways, intricacies that Filipinos, especially the ones born and raised in the Philippines, seek and express love. Now, today I'm going to be talking about why that's important, but also why you don't have to be Filipino to actually get the benefit of learning to read be beyond what is just being said. First, we know from research that about 80%, it's probably more, of what we communicate is not through verbal assertion, not just by our language base, memories, and by just articulation. There's a lot of ways to know how a person is communicating, expressing by just the way, if you observe someone by the way they look, how they're looking, how their eyes are moving, how someone is breathing. You know that when someone is sighing, what do you make out of that? So that's one. It's very important to understand that you and I will miss a lot of things if we are just relying on language. And yet, language is very important. We always teach our children, I myself teach my children to use their words, to clarify, um, to ask questions. These things are very important. Another reason why understanding the Pinoy love languages and why I've created this collection. If you're following me on Instagram, my collection is all over my account there. So I would link it below. Um, because sp- another reason why is it's important is because the Filipino American and the Filipino from the Philippines are very different as far as the way they see the world when it comes to spacing. Now, even if you're not Filipino, in general, collectivistic culture and individualistic culture may be different. Okay, so there's a lot of nuances in between. Not because you're collectivistic does it mean that you don't embrace some individualistic culture and their values. Of course, that's not true. It's more like a spectrum. Now, when it comes to spacing, collectivistic cultures are more closer with their spacing. You can think of it as a village. If you've been to the barangay in the Philippines, we even go block 5, zone 6, or is it the other way around? But the point is, they're so close together. The homes are closer together. In the American culture, the homes are, this is both literally and not, that they have more spacing. Of course, it really depends on where you are. But I'm talking more also as a figures of speech. Now, when we talk about boundaries, people get confused because spacing, the space between homes and boundaries are not the same. And that's why sometimes when people seek me as a therapist, and they've had many other therapists, usually non-Filipino, but they've also had maybe Filipino American therapists, and you can understand. Of course, they grew up here and in this culture, in which they might misinterpret that someone is actually needing a space rather than boundaries, or they're looking for boundaries rather than space. They're two different things. The boundary in the metaphor of homes is like the border. It is essential to have a healthy boundary for a healthy relationship. But it doesn't mean that every relationship needs a lot of spacing. That really depends on the person, the culture, the family. And so, if you are the coach or your community helper, your therapist, there's a distinction, and one needs to be aware of the distinction. One of the reasons why I'm teaching the Pinoy love languages, by the way, it is not based on, I think it's Dr. Chapman that wrote the 5 love languages. I haven't even read that book, but sort of like because it's so popular, know the premise of it. The Pinoy love language is not based on that there's only five. It's simply a collection because there's so many different ways that we are different in the way we seek and express love. Another reason I share that is because our co-regulation strategies are very different. What do I mean by that? The way we self-soothe. If you're feeling down, feeling blue, you might do something. People might pace back and forth, take a walk. Other people prefer to speak to a friend. So the way we seek comfort or get comfort is very different. One of the main difference of a very collectivistic culture and individualistic culture, by the way, if you study the Filipino and the American culture, they are a great material. And you could understand a lot of culture in between because there are studies where American culture is most individualistic, if not the, but just to be safe with the data, I'll just say top three. And the Filipino culture, also one of the most collectivistic culture, more collectivistic than even the Chinese. You could check out the work of Erin Mayer, who has compared many different nations and countries, and she has even a culture map on her website. So check that out. So it's very important. We have different co-regulation strategies, and this is what trips up multi-generational Filipinos because it's so different. One is seeking to be closer, the other one is needing more space, and there goes our conflict. It also happens a lot with interracial relationships. You might understand that 9 out of 10, when it comes to couples, if they're interracial, it's usually the non-Filipino that asks for my support. Basically, they like, oh, help! I don't understand my girlfriend or my husband. He's different. The culture is very different, and so they are seeking support. We also talk very differently, especially the immigrant, because there's a lot more sensing. So the question is, if you love me, if you're an American, say it. Very verbal. That's how we teach our children. But for the other one, for the immigrant, if you love me, sense me. I have given you enough information, almost like breadcrumbs. I've given you much, in which usually the non-Filipino would say, well, why didn't you tell me? You should have said something. To which the Filipino would say, I did. So that's usually the conflict in the home. So I just want to share. I also have a five Pinoy love language. There's even a course. I link everything. They're essential to understand your own culture as a person, but also it is so helpful. I teach this to other therapists as well, non-Filipino, that the juxtaposition of how different the Filipino and the American culture is, if you learn both, you learn so much about different cultures as well. So thank you for listening. I hope you're doing well. Again, this is Roanne Samuels. Take care now. Bye.